It's time for the movie raid movie review, and tonight I'm going to talk about Friday the 13th, Jason Lives. Now, the story involves Jason being resurrected once again from one of our favorite other characters from the previous sequels, who tries to get his vengeance out on Jason and tries to permanently rid of him, but it doesn't work. No. So Jason rises from his grave once again, and once again to take out his vengeance on what happened to his mother, as we all know. Now, story-wise, I think it's the best, in my opinion. I think it's one of the better, or at least one of the better ones in a long time. It's got a good structure to it. The characters, very sympathetic, because as you've seen in the previous sequels, even in some of the later sequels, that Friday usually has victims versus Jason. It's usually the victims that always die. Same algorithm, same thing. But in this story, we sympathize with the main characters. We sympathize what their purpose is in this story. And we also see that, it doesn't get too serious. This is not a super serious Friday the 13th film at all. And Tom McLoughlin, who directed this film, made it to where, let's add a little bit edge to it. Let's add a little bit of Alice Cooper involved in the music aspect in this film, as well as we see, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit added elements to the story rather than just a simple, stock kill, and so forth in credits. Now, it's not like I don't appreciate that in the earlier sequels of Friday the 13th, because that's where it started, man, and that's the introduction of Jason and how he became this, and this is, in my opinion, this is my favorite Jason, and let's talk about the look real quick. The look of Jason is great. I think it's great. I think, I love the work shirt. I love how that he wasn't really changed or altered per se entirely. We still see the wounds. We still see what he went through from the previous sequels. It's a continuation, and he's got wear and tear on him, and I love it. And I love that, Jason still puts on a badass hack and slash maneuver to his victims. And not only that, it's one of the few films of Friday the 13th that adds a little bit of dark comedy or comedy itself. And I love that too. And as we see at the beginning of the film, per se, the woods scene, let's talk about that for a second, where Jason is chasing after these paintballers. I love it. And we see this one guy who is a complete wuss, probably is terrified just getting out of his bed, so he gets his paintball gun, he shoots at Jason, and, Jason's like, what is this? And I love it. And I love the fact that Jason is still Jason as a persona character, like as we've seen before. This has not been changed or altered either. I mean, the only real difference as far as behavior goes, that we see that he continue to learn. He hasn't really lost that ability in this franchise. We see, for example, the scene where the kids are in the cabin and they're all hiding under their bed, are all bunched up, and we see that Jason goes in there, but or the girls are sleeping, and Jason is going in there, and he's kind of just wondering what they're doing. Because Jason himself is a child too, childlike mind, but a brute of a human being, or at least a dead human being at this point, as we know. And we see that he's looking at these girls, and he's not really sure what to do, but he just kind of continued to stare and just kind of observe before he makes his decision what he does. And ultimately, he doesn't do anything, as we see, because, as you know, here's an old fact. Kane Hodder did mention that Jason doesn't kill kids. Now, anybody who argues with that, well, then you take it up with Kane Hodder, because Kane Hodder, who plays as Jason for a majority of these films, obviously we have Steve Nash, and we had Wharton Gillette, we had everybody else involved as Jason. They all play their own part, but in this Kane Jason, it's fantastic, man. The way it was played as Jason, the way he moves, the way he it's just different too. The way he does it too. Like, let's talk about the RV scene where, Jason does his thing, man, and he does it in the most badass fashion. And we see that RV flip over, gets on fire, and here he is, pops out of there. He's on top of this, or at least on the side of it. He's standing there in the distance, and we see it still, getting on flames. Pure badass right there. That's like the coolest thing to see, from a horror character. But I will say, Tom McLoughlin, who directed this film, he gave this story more structure, more fun, and edge at the same time. For example, the girl, the main female role in this film, who plays as this kind of rebellious daughter, the daughter of the sheriff, and she does what she wants. I mean, we see the car that she drives, so obviously she's like a speed freak, and she just does what she wants. She's kind of a brat. And, I love the fact that, she is not one of those, weak, females, trip over and gets killed by Jason. That's it. Or, anything like that. We see that she contributes to the story, the characters, the main characters. And, that to me, that's how it should be with this. That's what makes this Friday the 13th film different. It is not a typical, back lore Friday the 13th, Jason or Pamela type of story. It's a continuation. And again, I love the fact that he gets resurrected by lightning, just like Frankenstein. That's also a really cool thing about that. It's a different way, or at least a slightly different way. Now, he's been resurrected before, but like this way, an act of God. Like Jason always makes it lucky for himself somehow. He always lucks out as far as dying goes. Now, others have significantly beat him down, but like he never really officially stays down for the count, so I love that this is one of the few stories that we can go on a joyride with. We can still see Jason doing his thing, but we also see these other characters who, again, once I mentioned the sympathetic aspect, we want them to win, we want them to survive, we just want them to prevail, and we just there's really nothing really negative to say about this. But the soundtrack, let's talk about the soundtrack. The soundtrack is badass, man. We got Alice Cooper, baby. Alice Cooper, you can't, there's so many other choices, but man, that Alice Cooper is a great choice to begin with for this type of franchise. What better way, we playing his music, and then all of a sudden we see Jason making a big slash, fantastic. So with this film being, to me, a pinnacle of something different, something unique on its own. Now, I'm not counting let's say, Jason Goes to Hell. That's a different and unique film on its own too. But let's say as far as canon, as far as story-wise goes, Jason Goes to Hell. Now that's different. I consider it as like a different chapter in a way, and I consider it more different look to it, a different perspective of Jason has got something much more different in comparison to this Jason. Now this Jason has still the modern brute force, but still that hidden supernatural feel to him as we see from all along. And I think this is an enjoyable film to watch, and honestly, it's one of my favorites as far as Friday the 13th goes. And if I were to rank this film out of a 10, I'm going to give it a perfect 10 because it gives you the kills, unique kills for this film. It gives you the same look, or at least a slightly altered, the damaged look of Jason. It doesn't give you a completely different look of Jason, or Jason doesn't act differently in a different manner that we're not used to, or anything like that. It doesn't, go by what studios would want out of this film. Tom McLoughlin made something that he wanted out of this film, not just go with what studios would like to see or what they would order for the film itself. And you can tell that Tom put himself in this film as well, like how he wanted it to be and what he wanted to be. It's fun. It's a fun film. And anybody, if they're looking for a serious slasher film, then, again, you can appreciate the earlier Friday the 13th films. 1, 2, 3. we see what happens. But at some point, they're going to be boring if it's the same formula after one, over and over and over. Because at some point, Jason will eventually be boring because he's so predictable doing the same thing. If they were to continue the same algorithm after 3 and final chapter and so forth like that. But again, I like final chapter. That's another one of my favorites, but that's a different topic. But with this, it's different, and it's got the great atmosphere that we're all used to, that creepy, Crystal Lake feel to it. And we see that everything is exactly what we would expect within Friday the 13th, but we get something a little bit more, a different flavor, something new. So I definitely recommend this film. Again, 10 out of 10. And, if you haven't seen this film, you really need to. I wouldn't start off with this film because if you haven't seen any of the Friday the 13th films and you start with this film, you're not going to know what the hell's going to go on with this. But if you have seen all the films and you haven't seen this one, you've got to see this one.